Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some pathofexile 1 discussion. Grinding Gear Games have put out one major patch this week already, but there's another one yet to come. That is going to be 329.1. 329.0b I did a video on. It was the big loot buffs to the Moist Delve content, as people are affectionately calling it now. This is the Bathysphere accessed content. So the Bathysphere content got a whole bunch of loot buffs. The most significant of those in play has actually been the Scarab chests appearing everywhere. Now it's basically Mirage Strongbox strategies again, except they're under the sea instead of in your maps. So that part's already happened, but 329.1 is where they can do some slightly bigger changes. I think the Draugur's Lantern might be a unique item that they were planning to get into 329.0, but it wasn't quite ready because it does have some unique graphical effects on it. And this is a shield that is being added to the game that reminds me in some ways of a unique staff that was added back in Heist League. This unique staff is the Fulcrum. The Fulcrum is something that is very build enabling. If you put this on a normal build, this item will cause you to go splat. You really need to work to make this item work. You need to find a way to become immune to freeze and chill. You need to be immune to shock. And you also need to find a way to become unaffected by Ignite. Not just immune to Ignite. Immune to Ignite will actually destroy the upsides of the item. You need to be unaffected by Ignite. What that means is that Ignites can be applied to you, but you take no damage from them. When you get yourself in that situation, what the Fulcrum lets you do is reflect any Ignites that you inflict on other enemies back onto yourself. Now by itself, that's no use, but you then proliferate them through any of the sources of Ignite proliferation that exist in the game. This is Editing Gog here with just a quick clarification. There is a similar seeming mod to proliferation that is not proliferation. It is found on the unique ring Beric's Respite and a much worse pair of unique boots. And this is when you kill an ignited enemy, inflict an equivalent ignite on each nearby enemy, nearby being 2 meters. This actually doesn't apply very well in conjunction with the Fulcrum. You don't want this, you want traditional proliferation like that item that I was showing before, that set of gloves. This item is still worth considering on those builds, but often you're going to say, no, it's not what I want. What I want instead is just traditional proliferation plus the Fulcrum and not to use Beric's Respite there. Whereas on other builds, you might prefer Beric's Respite or you might end up using both mechanics. So when you combine the Fulcrum with some source of traditional proliferation, the ignites that are on you basically affect everyone that is in melee range of you from the ignite proliferation source, and this can propagate a wave of burning death through enemies as you run. Essentially, it has a playstyle that feels a little bit like Righteous Fire in some ways, except the Righteous Fire component that you get from the Fulcrum can actually be doing DOT cap damage quite often. And so very deadly setup there. However, the Fulcrum requires a lot to empower it. You're going to need to find a way, as I said, to get unaffected by Ignite, which is not something you can do super easily. There are plenty of ways of doing it. And then you need to deal with the other ailments as well. Once you do, there's a real payoff for it. What about if we were to go 15% as far as the Fulcrum? What if we were to find a unique item that provides the upside of the Fulcrum, in fact over a larger area of effect, but does so with less damage and more quality of life, and that doesn't require quite as many build-around components as the Fulcrum does? Welcome to the Draugur's Lantern. This shield, which is coming in 329.1, is going to do exactly that. So, let's take a look at the stats of this. I do not think this fits into any existing builds, but I do think it's something that you can definitely make a build around. Firstly, the Draugur's Lantern provides a little bit defensively, but not a lot. So 20% chance to block spell damage, 24% chance to block, and 81 maximum life. Offensively though, ignites you inflict deal damage 20% faster. This is a powerful stat it's hard to get a lot of. So this is Editing Gog. I wanted to talk about this stat because a couple of things I've seen people discussing online are comparing this with Sadism Support. Sadism Support is not used very much, and in fact, it's my opinion that this gem is absolutely a trap. It's something that always looks really good in Path of Building, but then you actually play it and you find it's terrible. I wanted to look into the exact mechanics of how this stat works. So I want you to imagine that your ignite duration is 5.5 seconds. I'm choosing that number because it makes the mathematics a little bit easier. And you have the Draugur's Lantern, and you also have a gem level 21 Sadism Support, which causes your damaging ailments inflicted with supported skills to deal damage 100% faster. With this, you're dealing damage with ignites 120% faster than you otherwise would. What that means is that an ignite that deals 5.5 million damage, but that is going to be spread over 5.5 seconds, is instead going to apply over 2.5 seconds. 2.5 times 2.2 ends up equaling 5.5. So that's the way that the timing actually works. When you've got 120% faster, it means that 10 seconds of real world time is like 22 seconds in game for purposes of the ignite. So Sadism Support really compresses the damage your ignite does. However, Sadism Support's drawback of 70% less duration of ailments inflicted with supported skills is absolutely crushing. So that ailment that was originally going to deal 5.5 million damage over 5.5 seconds at 1 million DPS for 5.5 seconds, with Sadism Support and the Draugur's Lantern both compressing it a little bit and Sadism cutting off the last 70% of it, what you're instead looking at is 1.65 million total damage, but that damage is all dealt in 0.75 seconds, so it is 2.2 million DPS instead of 1 million DPS, but it burns out after 0.75 seconds instead of 5.5 seconds. So you can see how Sadism really forces you to absolutely spam reigniting the enemy if you want to keep doing damage. Now, Draugur's Lantern's upside, which we'll get to in a second, actually does counteract this a bit. So it is something you could seriously consider. There is definitely strong synergy between Sadism Support and Draugur's Lantern, but at the same time, Sadism Support is going to make the skill that is tied to it much weaker, except for the purposes of triggering Draugurflame. Ultimately, benefits and drawbacks, it's up to you to balance them, but my intuition is that most of the time, this support gem is too bad. And then Draugurflames burn enemies for 8 seconds after you ignite a target. What this Draugurflame actually means in practice is that once you inflict an ignite on an enemy, that enemy doesn't need to be within close range to you. All enemies within 3 meters of you end up taking damage for the next 8 seconds. And this is going to look quite familiar to those of you that have played Righteous Fire builds. This is what Draugurflames actually look like, and this is what 3 meters looks like in game. Now, I'm expecting this to be an unscalable 3 meters, but of course, we will need to test that when we've got the item in game. So next up, we have the question of which current Ignite builds and what future builds might consider using the Draugur's Lantern. Now, because this provides a similar effect to Righteous Fire, a lot of people immediately think, oh, I'm just going to throw this on my Righteous Fire build. That actually can work in certain circumstances, but I want to start with the builds that I don't think this is suitable for first. And that really comes down to a lot of the elementalist Ignite builds. I'm not saying you can't make this work, but generally speaking, I think that there are better options for an elementalist than using the Draugur's Lantern. The reason I say this is that the elementalist has to decide between a defensive shield and a caster wand or scepter. That's your first option that you've got. Or your second option, since they buffed caster staves so much in 3.29, is to just use a caster staff and accept that your defenses are a little bit squishier. Now, if you were to take the Draugur's Lantern, you're not really getting half of each world there. What you're getting at that point is the Draugur's Lantern is providing a bit of offense, but probably not as much in conjunction with a wand as you'd be able to get overall using a caster staff. And at the same time, it's not providing the defense that a shield like Aegis Aurora could provide, or Foulborn the Surrender, or just something that suits your particular elementalist build, because there's a lot of different ways that people can build an elementalist. I don't think this fits all that well in there. There's just lots of ways that you can make an elementalist work, and none of them really seem to synergize that well with getting up close and personal within 3 meters of enemies and having the Draugur's Lantern provide an extra type of offense. If an enemy is within 3 meters of you, you've probably already got very good ways of dealing with them. However, where I do think this item can shine is on Chieftain Ignite builds. Now, when I say Chieftain Ignite, this is actually what Righteous Fire fundamentally is in many ways. The Chieftain Ignite builds, what they fundamentally are, even though they often use Righteous Fire to get things started, they are Hinekora Death's Fury builds. Hinekora Death's Fury causes enemies that you or your totems kill have a 10% chance to explode, dealing 250% of their maximum life as fire damage. This is by far the best explosion in the game. Now, with Draugurflame, what can happen here is that one of those Hinekora ignites can then actually ignite an enemy, triggering 8 seconds of Draugurflame. This is then going to be a fire explosion based upon 37.5% of the life of the monster that went pop. And it's going to radiate out an aura of death for 3 meters from you, kind of like Righteous Fire, except potentially a lot more damaging, and it's going to last for 8 seconds. 8 seconds is no joke. The drawback, though, of course, is that, again, a lot of your defenses on such a build do come from your shield. Often you will have tremendous life recovery on your shield. And so you will have to decide, do you want to go a little bit more glass cannon? Well, in that case, the Draugur's Lantern is going to provide you a serious payoff for it. This is probably going to be better for a Chieftain than using a two-handed caster stick would be. Alternately, you can choose to stay with a more defensive playstyle. Righteous Fire is extraordinary at this. Righteous Fire has so many things going for it along these lines. However you exactly want to build it, there are lots of different ways that you can make things come together, but then you would use a traditional defensive shield and you would be excluded from using the Draugur's Lantern. Ultimately, I don't think that this is something that fits exactly into existing builds, and honestly, that's kind of why I'm excited to see it. It's something that encourages slightly new builds that are still recognizably similar to Righteous Fire, but that will be fundamentally different, will scale in different ways, and ultimately will have a slightly different playstyle overall. And that's why I'm looking forward to seeing this item in game. One thing I do want to say though, because a lot of players are already quite wealthy in the current league, if you want to get this item the day it comes out, expect to maybe pay quite a bit for it. That tends to happen whenever an item is added in the middle of a league. For example, if I wanted to trade for this item the instant it comes out, I can just throw 50 divines at it, and people that don't have that level of currency would be unable to compete with me. I'm not going to do that the instant it comes out. I'm going to wait, but there will be some people that will make that choice. And that means that if you're one of the first people to find this item, once we find out where it actually drops from, then it's going to potentially be very lucrative for you for a short period of time. After that, who knows? Maybe this will end up being an expensive item long term. Maybe it will not, but that's something we shall see. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. This is a fairly exciting new unique item. It doesn't exactly fit into existing builds, but all it's going to take is a slight modification and you'll be able to play a different style of Righteous Fire Chieftain that may even eschew the actual Righteous Fire itself in favor of a traditional Ignite skill, and that can get things started. Then, once your Hinekora explosions go off, you become a walking Inferno, similar playstyle to the Fulcrum, less damage, a little bit more defense, and also a lot less items that are dedicated to making the whole thing work. I'm going to leave it there. May your Val Orbs have interesting results.